So I put a poll up on Instagram, and apparently everyone agrees.
You should embarrass yourself. We are entertained by your suffering.
So 2021 is the 20th anniversary of when I graduated with my undergrad. And so I thought it could be fun to dig around and go through this. What is this boring green hardcover book, you say? It's my undergraduate honors thesis. If you want to hear some really angsty poetry, stick around. We're getting into it right now. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he's and she's and theys and gays. This is my undergraduate honors thesis, and it's a collection of poetry. When I went to graduate school, I discovered theory, and I started doing more of that kind of stuff. But as an undergrad, I really thought I was going to be a poet. And so my honors program that I graduated through, they had you do a senior thesis. And so I did a collection of poetry, and we're going to read from that tonight. Now, I do have to say, clearly I was able to get a degree. It's not terrible. But I will also say, it's not great. It's somewhere in between. And some of it's better than others. And let me tell you right now, before you even put a snide little comment down below, if you think anything that I'm about to read is bad, this is what made it into the final copy. You have no idea what went into the trash before this got bound together. Girl, I could tell you some stories. So this is it. This is my honors thesis. You can see right here it says Honors Thesis 2001. My last name is Stoner. That's not a joke. That's really my last name.
Honors Thesis 2001. Stoner. So it's not quite focusing, but you can at least
that's fine.
Get
it. Yeah. So this is my honors thesis. Let me tell you, I have always been a bit dramatic. Case in point, here's the title page, which I autographed. This is autographed. This is my own personal copy. I signed it to myself. Oh, God. So this collection was called Personal Geography, Poems. And then you turn the page, and there's a whole page of acknowledgments. Let me tell you, I thanked everybody and their dog. Anybody that I, walked past and maybe made eye contact with ended up in these fucking acknowledgments. Here's how it starts. There were innumerable people who helped me along the journey that is this collection. It would be impossible to name them all.
But let me try, I guess.
However, I would like to thank the following individuals. And then I go into, my mentor, the person that was assigned to my little thesis project, and people that I had in creative writing classes, and friends. And then Ted. So this guy that I knew, he was a graduate student right before I graduated, and he was still kind of around the department when I became a graduate student. He's an odd duck, but he was in my creative writing classes, and he would always accuse me of praising the muses when he thought my language was too flowery. So I included him in a little snide comment in my acknowledgments where I said,
Ted, for stopping me when I was about to praise the muses one time too many.
Except I just kept on. And then the song lyrics and the quotes. Oh, God. Okay, so I love a, sad, weepy song, and I love a good, strong quote from a book. So instead of just writing my own shit, I also, peppered these pages that have quotes from books that I loved or from songs throughout the whole collection. So I didn't really do, sections that I divided up, but I divided, loose sections with these pages. On this page, I quote Michael Cunningham's The Hours twice. Twice on the same page. Did I only read one book that year? What's going on in my life? So we have, one always has a better book in one's mind than one can manage to get onto paper. That's an auspicious opening for a collection of poetry. Oh, God. And then we have, she may pick up her pen and follow it with her hand as it moves across the paper. She may pick up her pen and find that she's merely herself, a woman in a house coat. So relatable. Holding a pen, afraid and uncertain, only mildly competent with no idea where to begin or what to write. I feel seen. So that's what's going on here. So this is my collection of poetry, and I'm just going to read you a selection. I think it's kind of fun. I do have to say, I loved all of these poems, and I loved the work that I was doing. I think I figured out that I was never going to be, the next big thing. I was never going to be a poet. And as somebody who was already leaning towards being an English major, I recognized that,
they're not hiring at the poetry store.
English majors are already sometimes having to figure out, okay, what are my job prospects? And when I focus on poetry, I'm like, okay, that limits it more. So if you're not going to be great at this, maybe look elsewhere, sweetheart. And I did. But let's go ahead and pick one. So the first poem that I want to read, speaking of my friend Ted that I talked about from the acknowledgements, we were in a creative writing class, and I don't know what happened, but he got like weirdly angry about the fact that this poem is supposed to be sort of sexy, kind of sensual, and I used the word crevices, and he was like furious. I don't know why he was so mad about the idea that crevice could be a sexy word, and he like went in on it and was like weirdly passionate about you should not have that word in here. So this is the poem called Enclosures. And I loved a good section, so there's like 1, 2. Oh God. Enclosures. 1. My naked arm cuts across the choppy surface, a flash of porcelain, quickly swallowed by the velvet dark. The water wraps itself around me, mossy green and earthy smelling, filling every crevice and embracing every contour. Lightning dances frantically through the clouds overhead. Rain begins to fall, fat drops sliding down my face, down rocks on the shore, down the backsides of waves. The water holds me, giving me the space of my body, and not one drop more or less. 2. My body has roundness like old stones, worn down by rain and time. I have the furrowed curves of a field ready for planting. That's the sex part. I open myself to you and feel you curl your taut body against and into mine, the rind of the fruit once again joining with the center's fleshy meat. Your hands search out the gifts my body would keep hidden, save such a delicate request. Clearly, I was sexually active. Planted.
Fertile ground.
Fertile ground. So this is a poem that I still really like. And the idea that I started with, the idea of being in water, is something that I wrote a blog post about. And I'm going to go ahead and link it down in the description box below. Because as a large person, as a fat person, as somebody who's trying to be all about body positivity and fat acceptance, that was something that really was a beautiful metaphor for me and something that I've really played with. I've always felt so comfortable in water. And the thing about water is that it absolutely does not give a shit if you've got a little body, a big body, a medium-sized body, if you've got a disabled body, a white body, a brown body. It does not matter. When you get in, it moves just enough for you to fit in whatever body you have, no more and no less. And so I love that. I absolutely love that. And that was the metaphor that I was working with there. And it was really about finding somebody who held me like water does. Now, the scandalous backstory is that I was like a 20-year-old who was fucking a guy in his 40s. He just seemed so adult and grown up, and there was something about him that I loved. And of course, he broke my heart. And there were other really angsty poems that didn't make it into this collection that were also about him. But there was something about it that just inspired this sort of sensual poem that equated him and having sex with him with water and my feelings of being in water.
Now that you're a man in your 40s, do you feel that you are as mature? So mature.
Oh, God.
It could be a comparison as...
Well, I mean, he turned out to kind of be a trash human, so we're kind of... I feel like I'm like that.
You too are a trash human.
I am also a trash human.
But no, it is interesting to think that you are now the age of the person you kind of wrote it about.
Yeah. And that's one of the big differences between me and him. I would not fuck a 20-year-old. Are you kidding? My babysitting days are over. Done. Nope. The next poem that I'm going to read is called Stheno and Euryale. And this was inspired by the first time that I ever found out that Medusa's sisters had names. So in some versions of Greek mythology, like the watered down, they just talk about Medusa, and they have the Medusa and Perseus and the whole thing. And there are some versions of the myths, because of course these have been traded across cultures and different time zones, and different time periods and things like that. So the myths have changed and grown and moved with the times and all that kind of stuff. But some versions of the myth talk about the fact that Medusa was one of 3 Gorgons, and that she was the only one that was mortal. And so I always thought that was kind of interesting. How is she one of three sisters, but she's the only one that's mortal. I always thought that was kind of fascinating. I'm fascinated by the history of the Medusa myth and all the different iterations, but I found out that her sisters had names, Stheno and Euryale, and they were the ones who were immortal. They were immortal Gorgons. And so I was kind of playing around with what could I do with that? And I thought one thing that was really big during the time that I was working on this was people who were getting obsessed with like birth order personality tests and stuff. And people have always said that, like the oldest child, the middle child, the baby, and stuff like that. But there was a time where that was like a trend and it was really big. So it wasn't just like oldest, middle, baby. It was like, okay, if you have 4 children and they were born this many years apart, and they would try to do these personality things. It was really weird and fascinating. And I never got into it, but I was like, what if Medusa was the middle child? And so I took kind of those basic personality types of the oldest, the middle, and the youngest, and created this poem about Medusa being sort of the frustrated middle child. So this is called Stheno and Euryale. God, it starts off so dramatic. Okay. Where now are the other sisters? Medusa's niche in legend has been carved, the page inked with the same blood that birthed the winged horse Pegasus. Her story remains in the shadows near the campfire, held in awe and fear, the story still told, still recognized, after all these many years. Where now are Stheno and Euryale? How are the lives of the immortal Gorgons lost, while Medusa, immortal long dead, lives on? Perhaps Medusa was the middle child. Perhaps in striving to create an identity for herself, she created legend by chance. Stheno, the oldest, was the serious one. She organized, planned, managed. What myth can be found in the details of daily routine? Her dependability earned her no more than brief mention in recorded legend, a nod for her existence as sister to Medusa. Euryale, the youngest, ran wild. She filled the spaces of her life with alcohol and sex, played her immortality for what it was worth. There's nothing unique in stories of self-destructive youth, and so she played in the gardens of Dionysus and left the life of legends to her sister. But life for the middle child was different from the beginning. Of the 3 sisters, only she was born with mortal blood. To her, things always seemed a little more difficult than they really were, never as fair as she thought they should be. And so she set herself firmly on the path to recognition, cursing the names of gods, walking in places forbidden to her, demanding her right to immortality alongside her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, and in time she surpassed them in renown. Her gaze hardened men where they stood, and her blood, bitter from years of self-doubt, gave rise to beauty and poetry. And for all she sacrificed, for all wrong she committed in the name of remembrance, she earned her place in legend, fought for it, died for it. And where now are the other sisters? God, I was such a drama queen! And I will say that we had Leslie Newman, who wrote Heather Has Two Mommies. She's also a poet. And we had her visit campus, this committee that I was on, and I gave her some of my poems, and she said,
"You have a poet's voice." Oh, I know.
I hate me too. But it's just so dramatic. And I am the youngest. I'm the baby of 2. But it was just fun to play around with this idea of what would Medusa's sisters be like? What were their lives like? Why do we not give a shit about them and we care about Medusa? So that's what inspired that. And of course, if you don't know your classical Greek mythology, Pegasus was born from the blood of Medusa, and he was thought to be the birth of poetry and sort of poetic inspiration. We had a writing group for a short time that was called the Pegasus Society. The Society of Pegasus? The Pegasus Group? Now I just sound like a supervillain. I don't know what it was. It doesn't matter, but we had a group where we wrote poetry together and got together and talked about it, and it was a lot of fun. So that's one of my favorites. I do like that one just because I thought it was a clever twist on mythology with kind of a pop culture trend at the time. You know what they didn't have when I was an undergrad?
What?
Sushi. We didn't have a sushi place in this town. I would have legit written a poem about sushi. So the next poem is one that's called Drag. And this is one I do have to say that was featured at a local LGBTQ conference as part of the program that everybody got. There was no competition, and I was on the planning committee. But it's called drag, and I'm mostly including it because there's little references in here that if you only know me from YouTube, you probably really think that I am a trash queen who only wears t-shirts. I do know how to do real drag. I swear. I do know how to do real drag. But now I'm older. I've been doing this for like 2 decades. So things get a little lazier on lockdown. Just let me live. I used to go hardcore. And even when I do shows, my undergarments and like the body armor is less intense than it used to be. So this is a poem called Drag. The pressure of boned satin is exquisite. I used to wear boned satin corsets from Fredericks of Hollywood. For real. From Fredericks of Hollywood that laced up the back. They were a nightmare. They were awful. Oh! I'm having flashbacks. The pressure of boned satin is exquisite as I watch the mirror, dressing, shading the contours of my face with color and beauty and grace, wrapping myself in the exotic garments of illusion, hoping to catch the exact moment of transformation, that brief second when gender becomes a label like any other. Like dress labels, there are designer creations and cheap bargain copies. There are genders to fit every taste, every price range, every mood. Like most queens, I want to own them all. There's no such thing as too many sequins. So this was fun. A lot of my poetry was very angsty. And there's some that are a little bit more sexy or risque or whatever. But a lot of my poetry was very sort of angsty and me processing some shit. Why pay for therapy when you can just write an undergraduate honors thesis? But this was one that was fun. It was a celebration. So I like that one. I think that it's a fun little piece. And it's different from a lot of the other works.
How did you say the silk and bone felt?
Oh, I said exquisite.
It felt exquisite. Did you truly feel it felt exquisite?
Like exquisite pain.
Okay.
I was like, ugh.
Was it as easy to find corsets and stuff back then?
They were hard to find, but I was skinnier, so like I could fit more things.
Okay.
Oh, I used to be so much skinnier. So this next poem is called Holding Pattern. This is one that I wrote when I did actually start going to therapy for a little while. And I went to a writer's conference and I hated the flight. I hadn't flown much before that. I think that was only my second or maybe third flight in my entire life. And there was turbulence, like really bad turbulence, and it freaked me out. And I wrote this whole poem thinking about being in the waiting room for therapy and then thinking about that experience on the plane. So this is called Holding Pattern. And again, we have numbered sections because I loved a Roman numeral. Holding pattern. 1. Circling the airport again, the plane buffeted in the thunderstorm, his mind searches for ground. He's never liked airplanes, these flimsy machines, pieces of metal in an imitation of birds, stuck together initially with hope and wonder, and then in the name of expansion, now in greed, bigger, faster, more. He is thinking of all these things. Air is the element of the mind, ideas and memories, random thoughts all hurtling at his metal encasement, trying to get in, revelations to send him plummeting while his mind searches for ground. He's never liked airplanes. Notice how I'm writing about myself in like the third person, like a fucking creeper. 2. Every week on Tuesday, he meets with a kind woman. Her job is to listen, sometimes to guide. She wants to help him confront his flying terrors, ugly, misshapen birds with bulging eyes, familiar faces. He tells her about the feeling of water on his skin, of swimming, of his love for rain. He likes to play with fire, burn whole books of matches. The feeling of dirt between his bare toes is more beautiful than he can describe. It's the air he's afraid of. He knows this. She knows this. Cut out the awkward point where I can't turn the page. She pushes him slowly, gently. She follows him into trees, to the roof, into a tower, upward always, but slowly. The sight of even a single feather is enough to make him cry.
I cried a lot in therapy, but not about airplanes.
3. His flight back was on a Tuesday. He'd had to cancel his weekly appointment. His time away was a shallow respite, now clouded by this airborne delay. He keeps looking out and down through the unshuttered window, needing some evidence of the land below him, even to find it racing toward him, ready to slap him unkindly with death. But there is no land, only the erratic blackness and whiteness of the plane's window being hurled through rain and fog and night.
Clearly, therapy went well.
So it's angsty. That was me trying to kind of put this together, and I had started to work through some stuff in therapy. And therapy, as I found out, really is only effective if you're going to get into the shit that you need to be there for. And I am a Capricorn, and I'm a little bit emotionally closed sometimes. The internet has been a chance for me to like be vulnerable in a way that I wasn't willing to be before. And so I would go into these therapy appointments and I would just sort of talk about things that were not like the things I should be talking about. And so every once in a while she'd be like,
why are you telling me this shit? Like, this doesn't matter.
Obviously she said it more professional than that, but she'd be like, why are you telling me this? Like, this is not what you're here for. And I'm like, I just don't want to burden you. And she's like, I'm a therapist. This is my job. Could we move it along, sweetheart? So it was interesting, and I like symbolism of elements, and so I thought that was fun to play with, the idea of being up in the air in this airplane as sort of a metaphor, if you will. I don't know why I said if you will, it's just a metaphor.
Like, I get it. Enough
I
about
get
planes.
it.
You don't like flying. Now
You
get
don't
it?
like flying.
Let's talk about your dad.
Yeah. This is one that I wrote about. I worked for about 1.5 years at Hot Topic. Yes, it's as terrible as you might imagine. And so this was all about working retail and what it's like to work retail, and how like awful old men don't understand that retail is a real job and that retail workers should be respected. And if you're one of those people, fuck you. So this one is called Bottom Lines, and there are indents that are in italics, and those are sort of interruptions. So if it doesn't flow perfectly, that's why, because it's sort of stream of consciousness. And my consciousness was tired of your shit. Bottom lines. Standing on tired feet, name tag pinned to crisp uniform, the register sings under my hand. Yes, ma'am, would you like a larger size? I can check in the back if you'd like. While the customer isn't always right, no cash returns without a receipt, the customer is never wrong. Would you like a store credit? A trained monkey could do this job, possibly even better once he learned about units per transaction and sales tracking and got a handle on the dressing room policy. Only 3 items at a time, please. Would you like me to hold these at the register? We spend hours team building with nothing to show for our time, the whiteboards erased and shining as though never touched. How could you better utilize your sales presentation? Reminders of how easily we could be replaced, of how often we are reminded of this fact. Do you have this in a large? Piles of t-shirts, immaculate and cold, too easily disturbed, are the focus of my efforts. My hands working mechanically, folding and refolding, the range of motion tense with quiet anger. Thoughts of my uncles, retired, old men on patios with glasses of whiskey. You don't know what work is.
Pinned to crisp uniform. Are we talking about your crisp new bowling shirt?
I know.
Or one with flames on it?
I know. I dressed like trash.
What was your go-to during that time?
So I wore a lot of jeans, but I wore like the bowling shirts, and I wore like some of the t-shirts and stuff, because I was skinnier then, so I could wear some of their like band t-shirts and pop culture t-shirts. And I did buy, when they were super clearance, I bought some of those goddamn raver pants with the
all the zippers and
huge,
stuff?
the zippers and the like 90-inch bells on the bottom. It was a time. It was a whole time. And we were all pretty lazy. So Hot Topic's dress code, I don't know if they've changed, but at the time it was like, dress to express yourself. And they were used to hiring people who wanted to look like a Hot Topic, like goth Kmart person. Our personal expression was all like fucking lazy. So we all showed up in like jeans and sweatshirts and all that kind of stuff. And then we all had our like Hot Topic outfits, which is when the regional manager came. And so my favorite was a pair of cherry red vinyl pants and a glittery strawberry shortcake ringer tee. A pair of bowling shoes that my friend Ron stole from Red Ray Lanes in Grand Forks for me. The statute of limitations has expired, so I'm not afraid to say that. And I used to wear that with an O-ring collar, like a bondage collar. It was a mess! What was I doing? So red vinyl pants, strawberry shortcake, a bondage collar, and bowling shoes. I was all of the things. Like, why pick a weird subgroup when you can just pick all of them?
Pretty sweet outfit. I think you should somehow try to recreate it.
So I have been a budding crazy cat lady for years, and I have a cat poem. Instinct. Lithe feline limbs weaving between my own. You never tried to trip me. You never asked for anything save food and shelter and space, an occasional scratch behind the ear, those instinctual things you always knew you needed. Your warm weight on my chest as we napped was nothing. I remember its relative ease when I feel other weight centered there in the center. That was a line that I wrote. Centered there in the center. I remember its relative ease when I feel other weights centered there in the center where the heart lives. The weight of men and alcohol, too many, too much, too often. The weight of violence, real and imagined. The weight of the mirror, the images it holds, and the values I place on those images. Once I held you up to a mirror, you squirmed away from yourself. You didn't need this reflection to feel real inside your skin. The mirror cat had no place in your reality, built on taste and touch and smell. I have not yet learned your kind of wisdom. I think we can all agree that that's not one of the all-stars. I can't remember all the time exactly. Like I said, it's been like 20 years. That might have been when my cat that I grew up with died. Aww. And so I think I wrote that as like this sad memory of my cat. And also the fact that all of these poems are about the fact that I drank too much, I fucked too many men, and I just made poor choices in my life. That's what this could be called. Instead of personal geography, we could have just called this, I drink too much, I fuck too many men, and I make poor choices. But personal geography just rolls off the tongue a little bit better. The center of the center in the center of it all. And then to finish this off, let's do a couple of the poems from the section that were about my family. Because that's really what I was writing a lot of these about. I mean, there was the poor choices. Long story short, I'm not going to get into it now. I don't get along with my dad. I never have. We don't have a relationship. We don't need a relationship. It's fine. But I clearly was processing through some feelings in some of these. So the first one is called My Father's City, which it's called My Father's City. And it's really a poem about my mother, which is about where I was at with wanting to have a relationship with my father. I was like, even if I'm talking about you, I'm not talking about you. Go away. My Father's City. My mother has given me her fear of cities. I can hear her voice, her warnings. Cities are dangerous. They are places to be feared. The center of the center. Cities are dangerous. They are places to be feared. The cracked blacktop can open, bare its jagged teeth of glass and rusted metal, and swallow you, leaving nothing. Memory is important to my mother. When she married my father, he took her away to live in his city. When she divorced him 6 years later, the city was cold to her, refused to speak her name. Go, woman, you do not belong here. How fucking weird and dramatic is that? I can't even handle it. Go, woman! Those words followed her as she moved back to the small town that had been her home as a child. In his city, my father's city, her memory was taken from her, and so she returned to a place that felt familiar, a place where stories and people are written into the lands around them. Despite the harshness with which she was often treated, a woman with 2 children and no husband, she loved that town in her own way. She loved that her memory had weight and place, that despite its ambivalence toward her, the town recognized her. She wasn't the stranger here she had been in my father's city. Here she would never have to fear that her name would be forgotten. She settled back in, remembering and appreciating the way time is measured in such places: funerals, graduations, sporting events, weddings, and school programs. Her feet knew the map of that town, and she has passed that map on to me, along with her fear that the city can swallow, can forget. That poem, as I read it back now, sounds like I'm writing a love letter to Bowbells, North Dakota, where I was raised. That's not a good life choice. That's a terrible place, by the way. If you are from Bowbells, North Dakota, I'm sorry. Unless you love it there, and then I'm not sorry, because you're doing it to yourself. I don't know why I was so in love with my hometown. It's this little podunk town in North Dakota. I didn't fit in. People were not terribly nice to me, but I just wrote that about the feeling of belonging in a place. Like, you're just part of a place. And that really small towns, everybody knows each other. Everybody's in everybody else's business. And it's just like this weird kind of intimacy where even if you're not like the coolest or the most popular, you're still part of the thread and the whole thing. And there's a divider right before that poem where I have quotes from Tori Amos, Ani DeFranco, and Joyce Carol Oates' book Blonde, which was about Marilyn Monroe. You don't get much gayer than that. I love the one from Joyce Carol Oates' book Blonde. The quote is, "If only you could comprehend what the hurt was, you must forgive. Honey, I'm a Capricorn. I can hold a grudge until I'm cold and dead in the ground." Okay, this is going to be the last one. Some of these poems I did read over and kind of select before we did this video. I have not reread this one. This is one that I wrote for my grandmother. And so I wrote this in 2001, and she was a really big part of my life. So when I was growing up, before I was school aged, I would go to her house before school, and I always have had a soft gentle, delicate part of this cavity in my chest where my heart used to be for my grandmother. And so I wrote a poem for her, and it's called Woman's Work. I will never forget. So I don't know what I was thinking. My first title was Working Girl, which I had kind of, I was a child of the 80s, so I'm like Melanie Griffith, Working Girl. Because I was my original inspiration was thinking about the idea of being a farm wife, which is unpaid labor. You're part of the whole farm, and yes, the farm makes money or whatever, but it's technically unpaid labor with people who have jobs outside the home. And so I called it Working Girl, and my mentor at the time, her name was Martha Meek, and she was like, "Are we married to this title?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And then, Working Girl. And she's like, "You do realize that's like another way to say prostitute, right?" I was like, "Oh, we'll change it." So I called this Woman's Work for my grandmother. 1. The land stretches out before her through the dirty windshield of the old blue Ford, a sanctuary of dirt and silence. She's learned a lot on this land about crops and machinery and the way life is. She knows about lunches and balancing checkbooks, praying for rain and dry spells, her half of the field work that had to be done. She knows about this land, about what it can produce. Sometimes she stops to just breathe, softly, to feel all that she knows deep down in her bones. 2. She's made breakfast in the same kitchen for the same man for 52 years. She can tell you what he likes and what he doesn't, and what he'll tolerate because he knows she likes it. She can tell you about compromise. Those 52 years seem like nothing, like they've barely taken any time at all. As if she's always been in this kitchen with this gray-haired man in his white undershirt. She has 3 children, grown and gone, a handful of grandchildren, and that man who likes scrambled eggs and the sound of her voice. She doesn't have a lot, but she has enough. 3. There were no scrambled eggs this morning, egg salad sandwiches and coffee, thick and brown like dirt, all set out for strangers and neighbors as 52 years of marriage hit the auction block. Dish sets, drills, assorted machinery, combines, and drills. I used drills twice. Okay. Dish sets, drills, assorted machinery, combines and drills, cedars. Prayers for rain have become prayers, please God, for just enough money to keep the house and the scrap of land surrounding it. His eyes find hers, silently pleading with her to help him make sense of this, to rebuild their fallen sanctuary, even as all the tools she's ever known are taken from her, packed up and hauled away by people she's mostly never met. Her good china sold to a neighbor's niece, in town visiting from Billings, an ancient tractor, the first her husband's father bought when he started farming, her cast iron cookware, an anniversary gift 8 years ago, sold to a young man with brown hair, bidder number 52. Now that wasn't true. We didn't lose the farm or whatever, but that was the imaginative part of it. But it was something that I just wanted to think about, how we treat farmers, and especially small family farmers. I'm not talking about the big farmers that have millions of dollars and rake it in or whatever. I mean small, just family farms who are always just barely trying to get through and get by. So I know it sounds really sad, but don't worry. They were okay. Dramatic effect. Nobody wants to hear happy poems about happy things. Okay, I lied. I'm going to read one more. This is one of my favorites of the collection, and this was published in a little journal that we had through the honors program. They would publish all of our little creative works. It was mostly a vanity publication, but I liked it. But this is one, because I have always loved mythology, and I think you can tell from some of the other poems, but this is one called I Remember You Mythic. Thinking about just being in a relationship. That seemed really weird to me. I had always had very weird, dramatic relationships. This is before I met my ex-husband. I mean, if you want to study in boring, that would have been that. But I had always had these dramatic sort of relationships and things blowing up. And so I was trying to contrast the idea of mythology and legend and these big adventures with just everyday boring life. And it just seemed very foreign to me. So this is called I Remember You Mythic. Orange juice and cereal, you, reading your newspaper in boxer shorts, tank top, like any other morning, sinking into the ordinary, complacent, the softened colors of time, familiarity. How many centuries since we ran through the dusty stoic streets of Athens? Delphi intimated nothing, gave me no clue that this would be the fate of our passions. I remember you mythic before breakfasts and bank statements, coupons, appliances, urban banality. You were Jason in glittering armor, your mind fevered by your quest. I was Medea, robes blood red and flowing, lending my lust and my witchery to your cause. Our passions were frenzied, bound with thick wire and blood, and our fingernails like talons ripping at each other's throats, only to kiss the marked flesh, wounding and healing fiercely. Fiercely. I remember you mythic, and Jason's flagrant betrayal with the fair daughter of a Grecian king is far outmatched by your cunning, your wickedness. You entreated the fates, trading passion for a calming of the chaos that surrounds you. My chaos, my legend. Jason victorious, though his quest is forgotten. Medea is powerless, stripped, bare. Apollo has left me abandoned in suburbia. I have no child to sacrifice. The epics are being rewritten. And I should tell you, I low-key stood up in public and read this shit to people. For real! I would go to a poetry reading and I'd have my little like shuffle of papers, and these poems I would read in public places! We used to do that all the time, and these were not the only ones. I read some of the ones that ended up in the trash heap before this ever got published. Cringe. All the cringe. Well, I hope you enjoyed me reading myself to filth with my 20-year-old undergraduate thesis. This was published. I graduated in August of 2001, so it's coming up on 20 years. I think about all the shit that has changed in my life in that 20 years. Some of these words, I'm like, what? What happened to you? What happened to you? What's going on? But some of them I think kind of hold up. Like some of them, I'm proud to have written that. Not all of them. Not the cat one. But some of them I'm actually still kind of proud of. So this is fun. This, if you want to find this, it's not available at fine retailers near you. You can come to the University of North Dakota, and somewhere in the Chester Fritz Library, they have a whole stack of honors program theses that nobody fucking reads. So it's there. You can find it. 2001. Good luck. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a fun little walk down memory lane. Let me know down in the comments, what was the most cringy thing that you remember from your college days, if you went to college, or just being a young adult, and all of that new stuff when you're trying to figure out adulthood and being away from home. Let me know some of your cringiest memories. Let's laugh together. Let's have a good time. The person who wrote that thesis is not around anymore, and I'm interested in finding them. I don't know where they went. And I like looking back and seeing all that stuff. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Let me know your favorite cringe memories and we'll laugh together. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Or if you thought this was the worst poetry you've ever heard, you can give me a thumbs down. That's fine. It's all engagement. The algorithm doesn't care, and neither do I. I'll take it. Clearly, I have no shame. While you're down there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also hit that bell icon so you'll get notified of all future uploads. I upload at least one video a week, usually on Tuesdays, and sometimes I even have a bonus video for you. Ooh, studious. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box, including a link to my website, theworldofchampagne@janessaj.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. Even in the full state of cringe that I'm in, I love that you are here to join me. And until I see you again, bye.